fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren. Heard on KCP 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery, and I'm Al Warren. We've got Mr. John Copenhaver sitting there. What's going on, John?
Not a lot and way too much all at the same time. Sometimes it feels that way, at least.
There's always too much.
Right.
Always too much. There's, if we could only select the things, certain things.
No, if I could just not have to email anymore, could set that up. That would be great.
Well, just walk away.
Yeah, it'll work like that. I wish. Maybe they'll be able. One day we'll be able to sort of just think our emails and not have to write them.
It's just gonna go right into your brain,
right?
And then right out again. Yeah, but you see, you wouldn't want that because I'm sure there's things in your brain that we wouldn't want to seep into these emails.
Well, that's true, and also I wouldn't want to get notifications in my brain. So that seems really terrible. So
especially the junk email,
Yeah.
Advertise your book now.
Right.
Well, why don't you? That's what the husband is for, Why doesn't he do your emails?
No, that wouldn't work either.
Come on.
He would delete them all and be like, you didn't have any emails today.
delete. Nothing came in. I don't know why.
What are you talking about?
Just junk mail. No problem. I deleted it all, so don't worry. Sweet of them. Well, speaking of sweet, we've got a sweet writer, Mr. Scott Alexander Hess. How you doing?
I am good. Thanks for having me.
Well, this is interesting. You've got 3 names. That's usually a serial killer.
Actually, it's good to Google. If you Google Scott Hess, I think it's a ball player. But before my first book came out, I put my middle name in, and you Google that, and there's nothing. So now you Google that, and it's all me. So before I published my first book, I did that little bit of research, and it's been very helpful because if you Google Scott Alexander Hess, boom, I'm the first 2 pages, I think.
Yeah, one ball player to another.
Yeah, so I don't have to. I think there's an artist and a ball player and who are just Scott Hess, but Scott Alexander is me.
Yeah, I have a football player named John Copenhaver and a judge and all. They came later, so I don't know about the judge, but the football player came after, so I can't really fix that one.
Right.
Hunt them down. I had to put an R in my name because there was a writer that had Alan Warren, but he's a foot doctor.
Oh.
It's very similar to what I write.
So that's right.
Feet floating, same sort of thing. Well, so Scott, tell us who are you? Where did this all come from? Where did you come from? All of a sudden, you're on the scene. So how did it start?
On the scene. Well, way back, I just went to St. Louis, Missouri to see some family. So the reading and the writing, I was reading novels, and when I was 9, somebody was talking about they read children's book, and I said, I was reading Jacqueline Susan and Harold Robbins, and so I read novels when I was a kid, and wrote and so forth. But my novel writing career really began in grad school. I was a journalist and did a little screenwriting, but went to the New School in 2007, and that's when we read a novel a week, and I fell in love with the form of the novel. And then halfway through, I was suddenly like, oh my God, I think I want to write a novel. And once that started, then it never really stopped. I just went, the first novel was the hardest, but then the second, the third, as I moved on, it was like, oh, this is my form. This is what I want to do.
Did it ever scare
so-
you? Like when you say, I fell in love with the novel form, and so I'm just doing it. But weren't you a little bit nervous about that? Or you just jumped right in and you had no fear?
Well, I think earlier in my life, yes. When I was younger, you might have said, can you write a novel? And I would have said, oh my God, no. But when I was in grad school and just doing all that stuff, I don't know. I was just at a point of like, I succeeded, I failed, I dealt with monsters. I was an actor too. So talk about dealing with rejection. So at that point, I was just like, oh, what the hell? I'm going to do what I want to do. It was daunting, and it was took a lot of determination and tenacity, and like I had to learn how to discipline myself. I had to learn how to read. These books they had us read were like so intense, and one was called Hopscotch. It like went, it was nonlinear, and it went all over the place. And I'd like read these books, and sometimes I'd almost cry because I'm like, what do they want from me? But it changed my brain, and I learned so much. And then, so I wasn't really scared. I was more determined, and also just, more and more focused, because I would get frustrated because it was not easy, especially that first book. And I remember Helen Schulman, who's a great writer, she ran the program, and she would say, oh, you like to kind of write these nice little sentences and hang pretty things on them. And, but I don't know if she used the word brittle, but, I didn't know how to really bring characters to life yet. So I was like, oh, is that how you see it? So I would get angry more so, I think, and keep at it and be like, well, what the hell do they want from me?
Did you slap her or? No?
No, I listened, and I was like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And it sunk in, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, I did finish that first novel, but I really didn't quite know what I was doing. But I teach too, and I always tell my students, you have to get to the end, and it may be very imperfect and messy, but you have to finish it, and then you have to let it be like, oh, okay, this is my first book. So I did get to the end. I finished the book. I had something. It was really by book 2 or 3 that I started to understand, like, oh, this is what I want to write. This is how to write. This is, and I read more and more people, and I would study them and be like, how did they do that? So,
what do you think is the most important thing about a book when you write it? Like when you're done, what's the end result that's important to you?
I think that someone has lived a life. I mean, once I start a book, I'm immersed in a world, and I kind of live that book, and I live the characters, and I cry with them. I live their journey. So a book, well, I feel I've done my best if when I finish it, a character is human, like it's really humanity on the page. Like they've changed, they've grown, they're fully formed. And then something has happened to them, I don't know, how a lot of times I, not completely stream of consciousness, but I kind of just write and I discover as I go. So at the end, I hope I've taken someone somewhere and the characters have changed, and, so if they don't feel like they've come to life, then I look back and say, all right, that's not my best book.
Yeah.
And others I say, oh yeah, hey, those people are alive.
Yeah.
Don't lock me up, but they're alive in my mind, and I think they come to life on the page. I hope for the reader,
Yeah.
and then I'm happy. I'm like, good.
So when you're immersed in these characters and you say you live them and feel them, think them and all that, do you dress like them too?
No, I mean, maybe a little. I mean, I was a method actor, so I do think acting can help writing. And when I was a method actor, we did, if I played a mechanic, I had to get used to like, what does a mechanic wear? How does he walk? And so if a character I'm writing right now I'm really in the new beginning part of it. I'm just totally playing, but for whatever reason, he's like, I see him as this huge man. He's like 280 pounds, 6'3", very shy, and he's headed to this farm. So I have to explore that. And I will do things like go put on an old pair of jeans and go walk in the woods. I do kind of have to get in their heads. So I don't know, John may remember or not, but I love fashion, and I get myself all dolled up in Prada. But if I'm going to write this guy, his name is Purnell, it's like, if I'm exploring that, I'm like, well, you better pull out your dusty old jeans and
Right.
walk by a tree or something.
Hang out in the woods with an axe. How do you experience these characters then? Is this all visual, or is it voices? Is it like, what's that experience like?
It's visual. It's in my mind. I see them and they begin to grow, and it's like watching a movie. I see them, they begin to come to life. They move like, in the root of everything, there was a little, what was her name? Grandma something, like a little spry lady who was inspired by a grandmother I never really knew. But so I just see her. I see her moving. I see her floral dress. I see how her body moves. I see her walking across the field. It's like they bounce around in my mind. And when I'm writing the scenes, I see them doing things. But then once they live, they kind of exist in my mind, and I can always see them living their lives, existing as they are. Yeah, so I experience them visually mostly.
Yeah.
But when I'm shaping them, sometimes I have to move that along. Like the new character's kind of still coming to life, so I may have to kind of engage with that a little more.
Do they tell you kind of what they want to be?
Well, not in like a seance sort of way, but as I do believe the muse is saying, when I write, someone told me long ago, he said, get in repose and be open, and then it will happen. Because my first novel I attacked. I was like, my God, this has got to get done. But I do find I have the ideas and I have the flows and I have notes and things, but once I start writing, they do kind of start to take shape on their own, and they do move forward. It's more like I merge with them and they are going somewhere, and then we go on that journey together. I'm not Scott the writer sitting there and like a character turns and says, we're going here. It's more like I kind of get into this person or this journey, and then we start moving somewhere, and I'm kind of with them, and then they move along. But
right.
Who knows where the guy,
Yeah, you're not waking up in the middle of the night finding a shovel in your hand or something.
No. That's more sounds like a Stephen King book.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you never know who you're creating. How do you describe your characters then? Like, and I mean this in a lot of writers that we've talked to will say they're like my children, or they're like family, or they're like whatever. They have a description. What is yours?
No, they're just random human beings who exist. Like in my mind, they exist, and then they exist in my stories. But they're often very unlike me. They're like creations. I wouldn't call them my children, or my family. I mean, some of them are horrible.
Well, we don't always like our
I've
family.
written villains, But no, I see them as like people, like little people basically that exist in a world. And the world happens to be in my books, but they do come to life for me. So I see them as existing. Sometimes I have to use myself, and that's my least favorite thing to do. I like it much more when the characters are distanced from me, or someone else, or that, I'm finding new things.
Right.
I find that more compelling.
So what's first? Is it the character or the story? Or does the story come and then, how does that work for you? Which one?
It's usually idea, because sometimes I have fragments of a story, but it's an idea and a place and then character. The one I'm revising is set in Delhi, India, and I was literally there twice, and I was at this place, and I got this idea, and it was like, but I was also experiencing something. And then the new one, I just was on a bus going to somewhere in Missouri, and I passed all these farms, and I started thinking about droughts and heat and farms, and suddenly I wanted to write about a farm, and then the character came later. Like, who is this that's going to this farm, and what's the story about? So, but it's definitely the idea first, and then the characters start to populate it.
Do you ever use people that you've met or known, or maybe you've
Of
run
course.
across? Oh, okay. So when did you use me?
You very soon.
Yeah.
But I don't get to see anybody, so I can't use. Although I can use John, but
Why not? Everybody does.
right? No. No, I use bits and pieces of everything, of people everywhere, and I take little notes and I take little notes just because you can't keep everything in your mind, but little fragments of people that it kind of stays in my subconscious, and I think it comes forward. But I do take notes, and everything's game, and you never know when you need the characters do build in my stories as it goes, especially the fringe or side characters. So sometimes I'll need I need a local priest, and then I'll think of different people I've seen, or usually it's different pieces of different people. Unless something's really specific, like, the way he moved and talked was great, and that I'm going to use for this particular character.
If you had to describe what type of writer you were, what would you say?
Brilliant. Whatever sells more books.
Right.
No, I guess I am a literary LGBTQ literary fiction. I actually had to write a description recently, and I was working on my writing group on it, and because I said, lush, gritty prose, and they're like, well, can it be lush and gritty? And I'm like, I like poetic language, so lush prose. I often deal with the land, our earth, or the river, our the weather. Those become characters almost, and then gritty, different in other eras, often kind of edgy or darker edges of things, outcasts. The Butcher's Sons is a butcher shop in Hell's Kitchen in 1930. So usually a little more fringe elements. And I guess the grit comes in the settings and the sometimes in some of the action, because the conflicts they face. Yeah.
So, in each of your books, whether you plan it or if it comes organically, do you have a subtext? Do you have kind of a meaning under the storyline or entertainment part of the books?
A meaning, like a purpose for the book?
Yeah, or a subtext. Is there some point that you want the reader to get besides the entertainment?
Not when I'm writing it, but that usually subconsciously does emerge. When I'm writing, I'm just led along, and I also often think I don't know if this is any good or not, or, kind of once the magic starts, then I'm on a journey, and I'm like, I hope this isn't a big disaster, but I kind of keep rolling. But often, my writing group will point it out to me. They'll say another really flawed male character, or you'll have, you're working with nature a lot, or they'll point out themes. And I do deal with a lot of off the grid people, off the grid characters, sort of. I think because I felt off the grid early, and so I do think there's always a flow, an undercurrent of people who are a little off to the side, are struggling with fitting in, or making a go of it in the world, are that kind of is an undercurrent. And so I do represent, I don't know if it's a theme, but I do represent kind of otherly people who it doesn't necessarily come easy, so they have to deal with a lot to get to where they want to go. That sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm so curious because that's a sort of a two-tiered question. One is, what is your attraction to historical fiction? Because you write a good deal of it. Mm-hmm. And can you discuss also Missouri and its role, sort of the sense of place in your fiction? Because I think it plays, like you were mentioning sort of the land and your comments about that, but it's
right.
Like a really important thing to you. So,
well, I like historical because really it's just other eras, and they call it historical, and it's a good tag, when you're selling a book. But I sometimes wonder, I'm like, well, I'm in other eras, and so I guess that makes it historical. But what I like is the conflicts, how more difficult it can make things, especially for my gay characters, like a young 16-year-old frail young man in Hell's Kitchen in 1930 having a secret affair with a big boxer. It's like there's a lot of problems there that could come up, and violence, and it's like I like putting people in different time periods and then seeing what they have to go through and face and deal with, especially the queer characters. In these other time periods, they have more struggles. They have to face things, and I like to explore that. And I do like I like land and earth and water and sky, and I love setting. Somebody compared me to, I'll say the name wrong, but Annie Prulix, and sadly I hadn't even read her, and then I looked, and Postcards was one of her books, and I was like, oh, I like this. Hers was on this farm, and Postcards is a great book, and I think I said a lot of things in Missouri or Arkansas because I experienced it. Growing up as a kid, up until I was about 18 when I left for New York, but I really experienced the land. So it's so close to me, it's like I can taste it. I laid in that dirt. I know it is in my body, so I can really write it. So that will take me back to Missouri and Arkansas in some of my books. And sometimes I said it in New York City, but that's a different landscape because I've experienced that. But it's not earthy. It's just, probably more the grit. But the one I'm writing now revising now is set in Delhi, India. And it was a whole different journey because I only went twice. So I don't really know India. It's a story of someone who's an outsider. So it was okay to do it that way, but it's different. If I really want to sink into the setting, to the land, I go back to things I know. Because even though I may act like I'm like, woo, I'm Mr. Bergdorf Goodman City Boy. It's like I spent a lot of time rolling around in the dirt, so I know that. I know that earth. So
yeah, that's really interesting that you mentioned. I think it's Annie Prue is the name. Although it's hard to pronounce. Her book Close Range, which I guess Brokeback Mountain. It's a collection of short stories, but
right.
Yeah, it's really interesting. But there is I see that similarity. So people have said that of your work. So I think I see it too. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Do you think, when you're thinking about character, do you think that the land or the setting, let's keep it more broad instead of just the land, but the setting, do you think it sort of shapes the character, or do you think your characters really, sort of cast a shadow, or their points of view in the land is really what shapes it? I mean, where do you come from that? What angle, I guess, do you take?
I think that they're forced to deal with the land, and they have to they either fight it or they become at one with it. When my stories about land, like the river runs red is the Mississippi River, root of everything is, it starts in the Black Forest, it goes to a timber camp in Missouri. The jockey, it was called Lightning, was Arkansas. 1917. So the characters often rely on the land, like the land either feeds them or gives them a job or is their livelihood, and then also battles with them, because often my land is, there's a flood, there's a blizzard, like in Lightning, not giving much away, but the father dies at the beginning because he's out. A horrible blizzard comes and he freezes to death, and the young man has to go find him. I read William Gass. He's a wonderful writer, and I read The Peterson Kid early on, and it's all about these people being stuck on this blizzard. And I was like, oh my God, the use of weather was so compelling and so like you said, it's like, is it the land or is it the people? But
Right.
It was both, but the people existed in this land and they had to deal with it. There was no getting around it. I don't really write people that rise above the land, I guess, that are super wealthy or that, I tend to write more people that have to make peace with it, fight it or rely on it. So they kind of merge in that way.
If someone had never read your books before, which I find very hard to believe, but if there is that person, which one book would you suggest that they start with?
I usually say The Butcher's Sons, because it's got everything. It has two straight brothers, one gay brother, 1930. It's got my love of language. It's got the heat wave in New York City. It's got a murder. It's got racism. It's got a whole bucket of elements and a ripping good story. Like, it actually has a solid story. Sometimes my novels will be a little more language and the plot is a little less. But I usually start them there because people often say, which one should I read? Now, I also do write a few modern, when I get overwhelmed with some of this writing, I'll switch gears and write something modern like Skyscraper, which was like an obsessive S&M relationship in modern day New York. And that becomes more of an emotional story. So that sometimes if people ask me, then I'll also ask them what they're looking for. But I've written a couple of these more modern day books, which are different, or they're very different from the bulk of my work.
You must have had fun living out that one.
Well, I did do my research. I'll tell you that. I always do my research, but no, there was some fascinating research actually around that. A man who was a bit lost, and then this muse wakes him up, and then it turns a little twisted in the second half, like a Kafkian sort of murder thing. But I learned so much about, I don't know if it still exists now. I mean, maybe, but I'm like John, I'm a little more at home making the meatloaf. Right. But they're like the club where all the the men with the snouts, and they're the dogs, and they literally run around in a little like sanctioned off area because they're the pups, and then there'll be another part so there's all these things of like, oh, who knew?
Yeah.
I found fascinating. And the character I was writing knew none of this either. He was discovering it all through this obsessive relationship.
Wow.
But that was interesting, and not even that, to me, not that titillating, but really fascinating. Like, oh wow, like look at this.
Yeah. John, does that still go on, or?
I'm sure it does. Yes.
Is that where you are now? That's why you're not showing the camera.
Yeah, he's got his little pup mask on, and he's ready to go.
Yeah, no, I think all that is very much alive and well. I have a pretty dull domestic life in current.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, he takes off his apron and he please. Now the root of the root of everything, enlightening too.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going on here? Now, this is 2 novellas, right?
Right. They are 2 novellas, and I do. I'm drawn to the form of the novella. It's odd. I don't know if you all have the experience, but I write and I revise, and I kind of know when it's finished. I know what it is. And it's always harder when it is a novella, but the book knows, like I finish, I'm there, it has a shape, it's like, okay, we're set. And it's always a little harder when it's 120 pages because it's harder to sell. But I put those 2 together because someone said, well, I'll publish The Root of Everything, but you need something else. So I actually turned one of my novels that hadn't published into a novella that was Lightning. And they are the 2. Root of Everything is the family saga that has a lot to do with land and real estate and timber and family, and they're one of the central characters is gay, and then the Lightning is the one set in Arkansas on the farm, the young man whose father dies in the blizzard, and then he has a love for horses and an opportunity to be a jockey or stay on the farm, and he also kind of comes out, has a relationship with another young man as the story goes on. So. Yeah, and they were put together because they both had to do with the whole land, earth sort of thing.
Wow. So what is it about novellas that you like?
That's so hard to answer because I don't know. I mean, that's the muse that sings. It's like when my stories are starting and I'm living them, the shape comes, and I know, especially halfway through or toward, it's like, this is the shape of it and it feels right. And then there it is. Like The Root of Everything has 3 generations and it's nonlinear and it goes all over, but it's like 130 pages. And that was, to me, that was the perfect shape. It's hard to sell novellas, but I go where the writing takes me, and then that's where I land, and then I breathe with it, and I'm like, okay, this is what we have. It's easier to sell a novel, it's like, so I have I like the shape of the novel, the novella. Who was it? Turn of the Screw, Henry James. He once wrote that the novel is the perfect form, because he wrote some good ones. But why some of mine turn out that way, who knows? They just kind of do. And I'm not going to say I have a love-hate relationship, but I'm happy with them. And then I'm like, oh, here we go. What am I going to do with this one? Because you can pitch a novel, but pitching novellas is a little harder.
Oh.
I've heard that folks are having a lot of, well, some success with publishing novellas and even short fiction on Amazon, which is fascinating to me. Now, they're fairly, not particularly, I guess, literary, but more like mainstream or genre, and have like very clear hooks. But it's just interesting that as we continue to sort of evolve in scary and wondrous ways,
Right.
how these forms may actually turn around and come back to be, to have a resurgence. I keep on thinking about that with particularly the novella, because it is kind of a nice compact form. And I certainly like reading novellas because they're rich enough to have real, character movement and depth. Not that short stories can't, but I think short stories are often more they have to be really sort of tight, and a lot of that iceberg in a short story has to happen beneath the surface, right? A lot of the development, but like a novella is kind of cool. Anyway, I don't know if that's something you've encountered or considered, but it's certainly an interesting.
Well, I've had students tell me that sci-fi novellas do very well. Because in a class I'd once said, "Oh, it's harder to sell a novella," and a student said, "Well, I write sci-fi, and actually sci-fi novellas are great." I mean, in anything on Amazon, it's so much is about marketing. So I think I do hope that, I mean, I love writing novels too, but it does seem with people's attention spans that they would gravitate to more compact things like novellas. But I don't know. I don't see that in publishing as much. But Amazon is a jungle, so it's like
right, it's its own thing.
Anything work with the right marketing.
Right. That's true.
I caution writers about that who want to use Amazon. It's like there can be some great success out there, but make sure you know how to market.
Yeah.
So now The Butcher's Son. Now you are revisiting that title?
Yeah, I have a new publisher and new editions. So we have new introductions. Ian McKellen, who's a journalist, wrote a new introduction for The Butcher's Sons, and Amy Dubček, a writer, wrote one for River Runs Red. So they're new editions and jazzy new covers, and because they came out, Butcher's Sons was 2015. So it had a nice cycle, but it's, it's a chance to bring it out again and find new readers. So those are coming out August 9th from Rebel Satori Press.
Did you make changes to them, or do you ever get tempted to go back on an older book like that's had a few years? And
no,
never.
No, I revise, and I live with the book. I revise it, I get it there, and then I'm like, I'm not one of those writers that wants to go back and keep like, oh my God, it's got to be more perfect. It's like, no, it's done. It is what it is, and if that sentence isn't perfect, then the next book will have a more perfect sentence. It's like, and also I write them into time periods. So it's like, that's who I was then. That's what I was seeing and feeling and experiencing. And that's the world. So put it on the shelf. And I do think of sequels because people have asked me to write a Butcher's Son sequel, which is on my list of getting to someday. But not, I see a book finished and then it's like, that is its life.
Yeah, I think it's an endless process anyway. For the writers that do go back and they change it and then want to change it again as they progress in their life, I think that's something that you'll never be able to finish then.
Yeah, I kind of think this idea of perfection is, although I tend to think you should want to write the best book you can possibly write. I think that's just about, and you're like, Scott, like you said, every book, hopefully every, book you write, at least to a certain point, is going to get a little bit better as you get more skillful. the idea of perfection just seems kind of crazy making, right? Like if I dove back into either of my books, I think I would probably go a little nuts. Like I just wouldn't want to do it.
Well, and I think what's perfect about it is it was perfect at that moment, or it is what it needed to be at that moment in time. If you go back and start fussing, then it becomes something new, and you're a different person. Like, so it just changes it to me. It doesn't, and I don't mind messy things. I don't mind sentences that get a little lost, or, it's like, I was just rereading some Faulkner, and it's like, some of this, like in August, and it's like, good Lord, this is swirling all over the place.
Yeah, there's a mess
but it's great too. I'm like, oh wow, this is definitely. I like his words because I swear I think he does make some of them up. Yeah. But there's like this long word he uses about how a person has a cigarette on the side of their mouth, and like 3 words are put together to describe that, and I find it fascinating. I'm like, huh. But many writers are fearless, including him, but I like to read a fearless writer who doesn't seem to be afraid of that, of like, maybe it's a little too messy, and it's like, well, that's okay.
Do you find yourself fearless then?
Fearless? Yeah. Yes, I do. I don't know if it always serves me, but I do. I get fairly fearless and put it out there and make it happen. And I mean, Skyscraper was my only Lambda Literary nomination, right? And I wrote that book, and then I did have doubt. I thought, oh Lord, what have I done? And I asked someone in my writing group, and I'm like, is this any good, or what have I written here? And she assured me, and we talked about it. And I'm like, I guess this is still literary, and but I have these dogs crawling around, and it's like, but and then it's the only one that got that Lambda thing, and I'm like, oh my God, thank God I published it, and like didn't hide it bury it in the backyard, you dirty, dirty girl. Like, oh, and then some people, that's the only one they read. They're like, I want to read that one,
Are you surprised by that?
A little, yeah, because it was such an odd book, and it's not my normal, like, sweeping saga, of the earth and the butcher's sons. It's like, it was this odd little thing. And, so I'm glad. And the second half does get a little more like my regular style, and things get a little wonky and strange. But it's a very unusual book. That journey was very different from my normal books. And I did write it in between historical books, and I think I don't know if I had low expectations, but I was diving in and exploring and wanting to just go a little wild. And I didn't have in my mind like, oh my God, this has got to be published. It was like, let's just see where this goes. And then I finished it and was like, oh dear, what have I done? It definitely was not. My family would say, is this one we should read? I'm like, no, not this one. Then they have said about every book, like, is this one we should read? I'm like, oh yeah, this one's good. You read this one.
Well, I thought Skyscraper was a children's book.
Well, we're all children at heart.
Yeah. Well, so who is this writing group that you belong to? Where'd you get these people?
Oh, the ponies. I'll definitely give a shout out to the ponies. That's our nickname. At the new school, they had us create a cluster, they called it. And you met and critiqued each other's work and submitted work. And this group of people, we have maintained that. So that's a long time, right? 13 years since 2009. We've continued to meet every week for all these years. And sometimes members will come and go a little, but they're all writers. We all are connected in some way to the new school. And it's a great, great thing, because when you're having doubts or when you're like, what the hell am I doing? You have people to submit to. And also we we check in, we support, like, how's your writing going, how's life going, what's going on. We share our accomplishments, our failures, and so it's a great connection to keep the motor going. And also read each other's work and just keep that part of it going.
Do you suggest that for other writers then, or new writers out there?
Oh, always, always. The main thing is keeping some form of momentum going and some drive, like inner drive, or if you have to make it more external. But the main thing I see with writers is they lose hope, basically. It breaks my heart when someone, and I also mentor people, they'll spend a year and a half, like writing, and then they'll get some rejections, or they won't know what to do with it, and poof, they throw it away and that's it. And so I always emphasize, like, you may be really fired up now and you're really excited, but you want to build the writer's life that's going to go on for life. And so set in motion some things that are going to keep your momentum going during the ups and the downs and the doubts. And, because, it's like a diet or the gym or anything. It's so much harder to start than just continue, At the end of my 10-week classes, I say, what are you doing week 11? No one ever answers. I'm like, you've given your writing priority for 3 hours. So why not do that next week? It's like, in some ways, the classes are less important than what they create and what you do afterwards.
Well, they got to go to some leather bar or something,
Right. Or that, you got to do your research.
Yeah, you got to get out there and whip it good.
Yeah.
So, did you like this new whirlwind? Like, do you like all the social media, and do you like TikTok and all this sort of stuff, or websites? Are you into that? Do you like to interact with people that read your stuff and do that? Or
I do, actually. I do. I have not done TikTok, but I do. I've met so many people. I've found opportunities. I've gotten a review. And also I've followed other writers and learned from them. I've inspired writers. I see people who are trying to write their first book, and I can inspire them. And then I see someone who just landed a big deal and see what he's doing. And so, yeah, I in the beginning, I was just like, it's a necessary evil. I have to create all these, and all my accounts have to do with my writing, because back in 2008, it wasn't as exploded as it is now. So we were told to create these things, and basically everything was connected to writing. So I built that, and I've met so many interesting people. And it's always great when people, say, oh, I saw that post and I read your book and I liked it. I'm like, oh my God, that's great. Because you don't know who sees things. And I've met a lot of, my first book was Diary of a Sex Addict, which my goal was that it be literary, but also carnal. That was another one of those modern ones. But I actually met, you may find this interesting, I met many people in the adult film industry, who read the book and reached out to me. It really helped my Twitter following, because when, like, this one gay porn star, like, I don't know, he did something or retweeted something or whatever, and it really helped build my following, because I was like, he had, I don't know, whatever the big stars have, they have a lot of followers. But he was like, oh my God, I've experienced this and this moved me. And so that was really different. I mean, never in my life would I think I didn't think I'd ever write that kind of book, but I did. And then it's like, I didn't think I'd be interacting with an adult film star online who read it and who was inspired by it in some way.
You thought you'd be interacting with one in person?
Well, no, that's a whole different book,
Well,
But-
where do people find you then? What name do you go under for Twitter or any of those? Where do they find you?
It's something around Scott Alexander Hess. I'd have to look here to see exactly who I am, but Scott Alexander, a good lookup of Scott Alexander Hess is gonna basically find me, and that's my website, scottalexanderhess.com. And then I wish every social media was exactly the same, but they're a little bit different. I try to go with Scott Alexander Hess, which is my Instagram. But some of them are a little bit different, like, Twitter's Scott Alex Hess or something like that. So,
Yeah. I have some of those guys that dress in puppy masks following me.
Oh, good.
I should hook you up. Maybe it'd be a next book.
Do they follow you down the street or just
on Instagram and TikTok?
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's interesting. It's interesting what they do.
Tell them about Skyscraper.
Well, this is what I'm thinking. This might be the book. I can hook you guys up.
Absolutely.
Maybe there's a sequel coming.
There could be. And they may have, there are a lot of gay men's reading, what do you call them? Reading clubs or?
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Together and they read a novel and discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
So I love when people reach out and have chosen my book.
I think that's
one of my
great.
books.
Yeah.
I
think it's, we'll have it all up on our website because we want to connect you to as many puppies as we can.
Absolutely.
So was the pandemic hard on you and your writing the last couple of years? Did it get in the way?
No, it didn't actually. No. I wrote just as much, if not more. I guess I'm a feisty little fella. I'm 5'5", and when faced with adversity, I work harder. I come up with, I was training on my phone with my trainer. I bought these stupid weights. I was walking. I was covered up in bubbles of plastic, and I was writing, and I had to keep all that going. And sometimes even more so during these times of struggle. In my day-to-day life, sometimes it's more routine, like, have you done this? Have you done that? Have you sat down and written today? But when I face adversity, it kind of revs me up, where it's like, they're not going to get me down. I'm going to do this, this, and that and keep rolling.
So stress and all that sort of stuff doesn't really interfere in your writing. So there's all this weird stuff going on. They're having a big anti-mask rally outside your door. You're still fine.
Yeah, well, because I decide this is my hour to fall into the world that is my own, that has nothing to do with any of this. My little fantasy world, whatever this book is that I'm writing. So, I do have to focus, I guess because I've always done a lot from the beginning in grad school and everything. I had to work and go to school, and so I had to be able to really focus and read a novel as I was on the subway and walking down the street, and write in a coffee bar for 30 minutes because that's what I had. So I've always been able to say, all right, you got to shut the door, turn on a fan, and sink in.
Yeah. You don't have it like John, where you're just making a meatloaf in your kitchen and
dictating my next,
Yeah,
Right. The secretary.
He's kind of like the, modern
As you drink
Julia
a gin and
Child.
tonic. Right.
Yeah, he's there. Oh.
Feed that back to me. Get me another gin and tonic and be quick about it.
Yeah, I could see that. Can't you? I can.
That sounds about right. I think you got me out.
Yeah, I knew it. Well, this has been good conversation. I always enjoy talking to new people, and I have to say, thank you very much. So our guest,
Thank you.
Scott Alexander Hess. Hope to see you again sometime.
That would be lovely.
Thanks, Scott.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Yeah. Good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.